When the Dead Sea Scrolls were first discovered, they caused both excitement and fear. Could they shine a new and meaningful light on the roots of Christianity, maybe even on Jesus himself? Did they contain anything that could challenge, question, or even prove the errors of long-established religious traditions? While official statements said otherwise, the truth was very different. In this video, we'll explore the history of these sacred texts from both an academic and Islamic perspective. The story of how this book came to light will truly shock you. It was once seen as dangerous, removed, and hidden by certain people. But the truth always finds a way to come out. Now, let's take a look together. You're watching Religious Story TV. We're just a two-person team, creating 3 videos every week. If you subscribe, you won't miss any of our content, and you'll be helping us continue. If you are ready, let's begin. How old do you think the oldest handwritten copy of the Old Testament is? If Moses lived around 2500 BCE, you would expect it to be from that time. But the truth is very different. The oldest complete Hebrew Old Testament we have is from around the year 1000. This means it's only about 1,000 years old. There is no full Old Testament manuscript from before this date. Isn't that surprising? According to Islam, the Torah and the Gospel were originally from Allah, but later changed. These scrolls may show parts of the Torah before the changes and give clues about how it was altered. They may be closer to the original Torah. Let's go back to the beginning of the story, because it's quite interesting. On June 1st, 1954, a short and curious advertisement appeared in the Wall Street Journal. Ancient scrolls, similar to the Bible and dated to 200 BCE, were being offered for sale. If such an ad were published today, people might think it was a bad joke, something illegal from the deep web, or even a secret message about espionage. Even though some tried to manipulate the story, most scientists knew the truth. This was one of the greatest discoveries in human history. The discovery actually happened in 1947 in the Qumran Valley. This valley is to the east of Jerusalem, on the western side of the Dead Sea, a region known for endless wars and conflicts since the beginning of recorded history. Even today it is a military zone, often shaken by the noise of Israeli warplanes. The historical scrolls in question were found here 78 years ago. There are still debates about how they were found. Some versions of the story have become legends. Certain details of this legend are unclear, and historians argued about them until the 1960s. Still, according to the most accepted version, the first discovery was made by a shepherd boy named Muhammad. He was a member of the Bedouin Tamira tribe. Later, he said he was looking for a lost goat. Whatever he was doing, his journey led him to climb the cliffs of Qumran. There, he saw an opening in the rock face. He tried to see what was inside, but he couldn't from where he stood. So he threw a stone into the darkness and heard the sound of breaking pottery. Curious, he decided to climb down into the cave. He crawled through the hole and eventually fell inside. There, he found himself in a small cave. According to his story, the cave had a high ceiling and was narrow. It was about 2 meters wide and 7 meters tall. Inside, there were many clay jars. Each one was about half a meter tall and 25 centimeters wide. Many of them were broken. It's believed that 8 of them were still in good condition, but the exact number was never known. Muhammad said he got scared, ran out of the cave, and left. The next day, he came back with a friend to take a better look at what was inside. Some of the clay jars were sealed with bowl-like lids. Inside, they found 3 scrolls wrapped in rotten cloth. These scrolls were made of leather, prepared especially for writing or drawing. These were the first Dead Sea Scrolls to see sunlight in 2,000 years. In the days that followed, the Bedouin boy returned and found at least 4 more scrolls. At least 2 jars were removed and used for carrying water. When proper archaeological digging began later, many broken pieces were discovered. Reliable sources say there were enough pieces to make at least 40 jars. We will never know exactly how many jars were in the cave at first, how many were full or empty, or how many scrolls were taken. hidden, destroyed, or used for other things before experts could study them. But in any case, we're told that more scrolls were taken from the cave than what was officially recorded or found later. In the end, 2 complete scrolls and 22 damaged fragments were brought into the light. At this point, the story becomes a bit unclear. It seems that the Bedouins, thinking they had found something valuable, took the scrolls to a local tribal leader, sheikh. The sheikh didn't understand what they were, so he sent them to a Christian antique dealer known as Kando. His real name was Khalil Iskander Shaheen. Kando belonged to the Syrian church. Because of that, he contacted someone named George Isaiah, who was part of the Jerusalem church. Reliable sources say the 2 of them acted quickly, went to the Qumran cave, and got more scrolls. George Isaiah then informed the head of the Syrian Jacobite church, Archbishop Athanasius Yeshua Samuel, who was also the leader of the monastery of St. Mark. Athanasius Yeshua Samuel was not well educated. He couldn't read or even recognize the scrolls that were brought to him. One of the first and most trusted commentators on the Qumran discovery, Edmund Wilson, said this about Samuel, to see if it was leather or parchment. Still, despite his lack of education, he was a clever man. In his monastery, St. Mark's, there was an ancient document collection, so he had a sense that what he held in his hands was something very important. In August of that same year, the Metropolitan Archbishop Samuel sent 5 monks, along with George Isaiah, to the Qumran cave. The team worked at night, which was illegal. After long examinations and digging at the site, they found at least 1 jar and some new fragments. 1 year later, when the first official search team arrived, they saw that the original cave entrance had been changed. A larger opening had been dug under the main entrance that the Bedouins had found. What the monks found during their secret visits is still unknown. However, according to one claim, some scrolls that have never been shown to the public ended up in the hands of the church. What happened next was full of action and mystery, like something out of a Holy Grail story. But here, I'll tell you only the confirmed or mostly known facts. One of these facts is this. After Archbishop Samuel got hold of some of the scrolls, he tried to find out how old they were. But the experts he showed them to didn't know what they were. In fact, they even doubted their age and whether they were real. It seems that even though Samuel didn't fully understand what he had found, he was the only one who sensed that these scrolls were possibly the oldest versions of the Bible and Torah, and that they could cause big debates. He believed they should be kept secret. In September, during a trip to Syria, Archbishop Samuel met with Miles Copeland, the CIA representative in Damascus. According to Copeland, a clever Egyptian trader came to visit him one day and said he had a great treasure. The man reached into a dirty sack and pulled out a scroll. Its edges were already falling apart, and little pieces were flaking off. When Copeland asked what it was, the trader didn't answer. Copeland offered to take pictures of the scroll and study it if the trader left it with him. To take the photos, Copeland and his colleagues brought the scroll to the roof of the U.S. consulate in Damascus and unrolled it there. At that moment, a strong wind blew. Copeland remembered that pieces of the scroll flew off into the streets and were lost forever. A big part of the scroll was destroyed this way. Still, with the equipment provided by the U.S. government, Copeland and his team managed to take about 30 photographs. These photos were later sent to the U.S. Embassy in Beirut and shown to an expert in ancient languages. The expert said the scroll was part of the Book of Daniel from the Old Testament. Some parts were written in Aramaic, others in Hebrew. Unfortunately, that's where the story ends. It's unknown if the scroll Copeland photographed was ever fully identified, but one thing is certain: it was never made public. Metropolitan Samuel got in touch with Professor Eliezer Sukenik from the Hebrew University's archaeology department and showed him the scrolls he still had. After receiving the scrolls, Sukenik secretly left Jerusalem on November 29, 1947. There, the details of how the scrolls were found were explained to him, and he was shown 3 scrolls that had been put up for sale, along with the jars they were found in. These were the ones that had slipped out of the Metropolitan's hands. Sukernik was allowed to take the scrolls home and study them. But that night, a dramatic piece of news came on the radio. The United Nations had voted to approve the creation of the State of Israel. At that moment, Sukernik decided to buy the scrolls. With all the historic events starting to unfold, the scrolls seemed to carry a symbolic meaning as well. Toward the end of January 1948, Sukernik arranged a secret meeting to view the scrolls that were still in the hands of Metropolitan Samuel. During the meeting, Sukernik tried to lower the price. The Syrian middleman, who was representing the Metropolitan, arranged another meeting for the following week. Meanwhile, Sukernik was trying to find the money. But for 2 weeks, he heard nothing from the Metropolitan or the middleman until he received a letter. In that letter, it said the Metropolitan had decided not to sell the scrolls at all. Sukernik would only find out the truth much later. American experts who had photographed the scrolls had made a much higher offer and bought all of them from the Metropolitan. In February, Metropolitan Samuel contacted the Jerusalem-based Albright Institute and sent the full copies of the scrolls to Professor William Albright, a top expert from Johns Hopkins University. On March 15th, Professor Albright confirmed the importance of Sukernik's discoveries and gave his approval for the Qumran scrolls. Without even realizing it, he also gave the boldest estimate of their age. "I wholeheartedly congratulate you on the greatest manuscript discovery of modern times. I have no doubt that the scrolls are even older than the Nash papyrus. My preferred date is 100 BCE. What an incredible discovery, and I can happily say there is not the slightest doubt about the scrolls' authenticity." The scrolls found were written on leather, copper and paper. They were made up of about 40,000 fragments in total, some written in Hebrew and some in Aramaic. These were the oldest copies of the Torah and the Bible ever discovered, making them the oldest known religious writings of the Abrahamic faiths. Of course, it would take many years of digging and searching to gather all 40,000 fragments. On page 4 of the Times newspaper, Monday, April 12, 1948, the following headline appeared: "Ancient manuscript found in Palestine, New York, April 11th. Yesterday, Yale University announced the discovery of the oldest manuscript of the Book of Isaiah in Palestine. The manuscript was found in the library of the Syrian monastery of St. Mark in Jerusalem and has been preserved as a scroll since around the 1st century BCE. The scrolls were identified by staff from the American School of Oriental Research in Jerusalem, also known as the Albright Institute. However, the world did not react as expected. Universities did not rise in excitement. This was because the New York Times was publishing one breaking news story after another. The war crime trials from World War II were still ongoing. 14 SS officers who had worked in death squads were sentenced to death. Also, just 2 days before the scroll news was published, on the previous Friday, the Irgun and Lehi groups had attacked a village. Women and children were killed. Because of these tragic events, the scroll discovery didn't catch much public attention. But behind the scenes, political and religious powers who understood their importance began to act. Due to the continuing conflicts in the region, official and professional teams were unable to conduct digs. So, for many years, excavations had to be done illegally. In the years that followed, the scrolls turned into a huge business. The whole issue became an international scandal. Fragments of the scrolls were carried from one country to another, hidden inside dirty wallets or cigarette packs. There were many forgeries, and con artists tricked countless people. Some countries even offered rewards worth millions of dollars for the writings. You can read about all these claims in the book The Dead Sea Scrolls. Deception by Michael Bagant and Richard Lee, the authors of books about the Templar Knights, the Holy Blood and the Holy Grail, raised some serious questions for Christianity. The scrolls contained ideas that went against the later images created about early Christianity. For example, while it is often claimed that Jesus was not political, the scrolls showed that the Zealots had militant and messianic nationalist goals for the Jewish people. They also suggested that Jesus never tried to start a new religion or oppose Jewish law. The scrolls and their authors were connected to the same first-century period that is mentioned in the New Testament as the beginning of early Christianity. These texts mention a figure called the Teacher of Righteousness. In some places, the description of this teacher sounds almost like a reference to Jesus. Many experts have said this, but this person is clearly not considered divine. The findings were backed by the strength of 20th century science and research. But even with all this evidence, could one really shake the faith of millions with a single discovery? That's why only a small part of the texts, like the one we just shared, were allowed to be published. But even those parts showed that these writings could challenge Christianity and were likely early religious texts. Still, we must repeat. Some parts of the scrolls, especially the ones that are said to be the most shocking, were never made public. One of the most striking discoveries was the copper scroll. It was found in cave number 3 at Qumran. Unlike other scrolls, this one was more like a simple list. It named 62 places where treasures made of gold, silver, and valuable religious items were said to be hidden. Most of the locations were in Jerusalem, some under or around the temple, and the rest in the hills and countryside all the way to Qumran. If the information in the scroll is true, all these hidden treasures would add up to about 65 kilograms of silver and 26 kilograms of gold. Compared to other famous treasure stories, that's not a huge amount, but the religious and symbolic meaning is much more important than the money. Although the copper scroll was never officially shared with the public, experts who read it believed the treasure came from the temple, hidden during the Roman invasion. That means the scroll could date to around the year 68 CE, when the Romans attacked. As we mentioned before, some members of the official international team, like Professor Cross and Father Milik, claimed that the treasure was entirely fictional and that the map was fake. Now, however, many independent historians believe the treasure was real. But they also believe that it is almost impossible to find the hiding places. The directions and names in the scroll were based on ancient local names, which disappeared long ago. The shape of the land and its landmarks have changed beyond recognition after 2,000 years of wars and destruction. Lastly, something unexpected could still come from the secret scroll market. At any time, things that have been kept hidden might finally be made public. As we said before, such materials do exist. The real question is, when will the people who hold them decide to reveal them? No matter where new discoveries come from, fresh and possibly major revelations are on the way. When that happens, we may gain much more insight into the nature of ancient Judaism, the roots of both Christianity and Islam, and the real history of the Bible. The Dead Sea Scrolls give us a new perspective on the 3 major religions born in the Middle East. And the more we study these religions, the more we understand that they are not so different after all. They overlap, share many things in common, and seem to come from the same source. Do the scrolls support the Quran and Islam? Some parts of the scrolls appear to indirectly support Islamic teachings, such as the shared roots of the 3 Abrahamic religions. The more we study these religions, the more we understand that they are not so different after all and seem to come from the same source. This idea matches Islam's view of the Tawhidi tradition, the belief that Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad, peace be upon them, were all prophets sent by the same divine source. Criticism of Christian beliefs. The scrolls include parts that may raise doubts about Jesus' divinity, uniqueness, or originality. For example, a suffering similar to that of Jesus was found in an ancient scroll hidden in the Jewish desert. This kind of statement suggests that Jesus' message may have come from an earlier tradition, like the Qumran community, not something completely new. That aligns with Islam's belief that Jesus was a prophet, not God. Implied criticism of added Christian dogmas. The scrolls highlight differences between early Christian writings and modern institutional Christianity. This supports Islam's claim that the gospel was changed over time, a belief stated clearly in the Quran. The scrolls show that different Jewish sects had different beliefs and became divided. This matches verses in the Quran about the people of the book falling into disagreement, which makes them important for Muslims to study. When Jewish scribes copied the Hebrew Old Testament by hand because there was no printing press, they destroyed the old copy after making a new one. That's why the earlier versions have not survived. This was not an accident, they were destroyed on purpose. If we compare this to the Quran, we have physical Quran manuscripts that go back to the time of Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu. One famous copy is kept at the University of Birmingham. Later, some much older manuscripts of the Torah were discovered, the Dead Sea Scrolls. This discovery changed the idea that we had no old versions of the Torah. These scrolls are very important for many reasons. Most of the texts include parts of the Torah, Jewish religious laws, writings about the end times, and prayers. The most famous one is the complete copy of the book of Isaiah. It's a beautiful scroll, almost perfectly preserved. Many people believe the Dead Sea Scrolls prove that today's Bible is correct, but that's not fully true. In some cases, yes, like with the book of Isaiah, but many other books are different. Sometimes the differences are big, like a version of the book of Jeremiah that is 15% shorter. These differences are between the Masoretic text, used in most modern translations, and the ancient versions found in the Dead Sea Scrolls.